Coming up in today's newscast, the IDF launches a series of targeted attacks against Hamas after a dozen rockets are fired into Israeli territory. Israel finally cancels its ban on tourists from Indonesia, and an Israeli star has just secured himself a spot on America's Got Talent.
The Israeli army has launched a series of targeted attacks against Hamas overnight in response to an increasing wave of incendiary terror attacks from Gaza. The IDF spokesperson's unit has confirmed that an attack was carried out targeting a vehicle that belongs to a Hamas operative involved in flaming kite and balloon attacks.
Incendiary devices like these have caused millions of dollars in damages, as well as untold damages to the environment surrounding Gaza. Just earlier on Tuesday, 5 different fires caused by Gazan arson were blazing across southern Israel, and all 5 of the fires were reportedly in the Be'eri and Kisufim forests. Israeli aircraft responded to the flaming kite and balloon flyers by targeting a vehicle used by a group of Palestinian arsonists, as well as at least 2 Hamas observation posts. Speaking on the situation, the IDF said that the Hamas terror organization will bear the consequences for facilitating terror and instability. Gazans didn't take the return fire lying down, however. Hamas said in a statement that a bombing will be met with a bombing. So elsewhere, while Israeli forces targeted the Hamas operative's vehicle, this morning a dozen rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip into Israeli territory. Red alert sirens were sounded all across the regions of Chof Ashkelon, Sha'ar HaNegev, Eshkol, and Sderot. The Iron Dome defense system was launched into action and intercepted at least 3 of the 12 projectiles, while the others were allowed to fall. Thankfully, there were no reports of injuries or damages at this time.
Returning to the studio now with more on the events along the Gaza Strip this morning is founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, Dr. Martin Sherman. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me again.
Now, many are calling for another Operation Cast Lead or Protective Edge in Gaza, to end this issue of the kites more specifically once and for all. Would you?
Well, unless you think the Palestinians are going to morph into something that they haven't been for the last 100 years and show very little sign of them turning into in the foreseeable future, clearly the policy up to now has failed. And I mean the policy up to now, including limited campaigns that were waged in the past, I think was Cast-led in 2008-9, Pillar of Defense in 2012, I think it was, and more recently, Protective Edge in 2014.
Well, when you say Palestinians, are you speaking about the governments? Because again, there is a humanitarian crisis.
I think it's a mistake to separate between the two, because the Gaza population is not the victim of the terrorist leadership. It's the crucible from which that leadership emerged and in which it was formed. And basically, and this might sound a little harsh, but basically in the long run, they are either going to be Arabs in Gaza or Jews in the Negev. It doesn't look like they're going to be both. And unless the IDF takes strategic action, which means taking over Gaza and deconstructing rather than reconstructing Gaza, I see the bleak future continuing.
The Israeli government does seem to want to alleviate the humanitarian crisis that exists in the Gaza Strip, and Israel has just approved a privately funded plan to build a massive solar field to aid, Gaza's power crisis. Israel is also now in talks with Cyprus regarding a potential seaport in Gaza.
That's a total inversion of causality, because the enmity towards Israel in the Gaza Strip and elsewhere, by the way, is not the consequence of Israeli action. The economic distress there is being caused by the enmity towards Israel. So the economic distress is the consequence, not the cause of the enmity there.
But the question is, does violence end violence?
That's a good question which you should ask the Gazans. All the Gazans need to do to end the humanitarian crisis there is nothing. Just stop trying to kill Jews and allow Israeli inventiveness and Israeli enterprise to turn the Gaza Strip into what they turned Israel, from a struggling, poor industrial, agricultural country into a post-industrial country leading the world in just about every field of human endeavor and generating great prosperity. That's all the Gazans need to do. It's just end the violence.
All right, thank you for joining us. The one and only Prince William is continuing his historic visit to Israel today after playing soccer with Jewish and Arab kids in a coexistence program. The Duke of Cambridge made a special trip to Tel Aviv's beach this morning, and he joins a cultural event here in Tel Aviv before heading to a very special face-to-face with possibly the most influential Israeli on the planet right now. Nope, it's not Prime Minister Netanyahu. That was yesterday. I'm talking about Israeli Eurovision champ Netta Barzilai.
Israelis blocked the streets and craned their necks for a chance to glimpse Prince William chatting with the queen of all divas. This caps what's already been a very welcome trip for the British prince. The occasion marks the first official state visit by a member of British royalty to Israel since the time of the British Mandate.
I think this is beautiful to have this historical visit, because this is the first time anybody came from the monarchy to Israel, and I hope this is not the last time. So please come back again.
The UK has kept a very careful hands-off approach to Middle East politics over the last 70 years. But with the kingdom set to leave the European Union in the wake of Brexit, many see this trip as London's last chance to keep a policy foothold in global politics. Prince William's itinerary has followed the typical schedule for these foreign state visits, including stops in the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial and meetings with both Netanyahu and Israeli President Reuven Rivlin.
Israel's remarkable story is partly one of remembering this terrible past, but also looking forward to a much more hopeful future. There is, and I've seen it already, an essential vibrancy to this country. From the early stories of the kibbutzim to the revival of Hebrew as a living modern language, to the high-tech economies that we see around us here in Tel Aviv. The modern story of Israel is one of inventing, creating, innovating, and striding confidently into its future.
This evening, Prince William will travel to the Palestinian Authority to meet with PA President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah. President Rivlin has asked Prince William to convey a message of peace to Abbas and a plea to finally come together to end this decades-long conflict.
Relations between Israel and Indonesia sunk to an all-time low last month, and considering the two countries don't even have diplomatic ties, that's saying quite a lot. The Muslim-majority country announced that they would refuse Israeli tourists from entering the country as a consequence for the bloody Israeli-Palestinian clashes along the Gaza border last month. Israel responded in turn by canceling all incoming visas for Indonesian tourists. But now, a few weeks later, both countries have suddenly reversed and seemingly made amends. Both countries will now resume issuing tourist visas.
Indonesia is the largest Muslim-majority country on the planet. Though the country has never been openly opposed to the state of Israel, politics between the two nations have been delicate over the last several decades. But despite near-frozen ties, tens of thousands of Christian pilgrims from Indonesia flock to the Holy Land every year, typically staying for up to a week at a time. In other words, that's a pretty significant source of tourism, which is why Israeli tourism officials initially condemned the government for putting Indonesians on the no-fly list. In fact, dozens of Israeli travel companies are practically dependent on the steady flow of Indonesian Christians. One such travel manager points out that not only would the travel ban probably bankrupt part of Israel's tourism sector, but that these Indonesians are lovers of Israel who want to visit and also donate a lot of money. Others point out that the only way to hopefully improve ties with Indonesia is to continue and grow whatever interactions already exist. The vast majority of Indonesians have an unfavorable view of Israel, but with more and more Israeli travel workers learning Indonesian, hopefully these are the seeds of peace that can grow into something much bigger.
Poland's controversial Holocaust law ignited a fierce controversy earlier this year, along with something of an international crisis. The law originally criminalized anyone who called Nazi death camps in Poland Polish death camps, with up to 3 years in jail. Israeli leaders joined the chorus, who say that the law dangerously whitewashes a very disturbing period in human history. But it looks like Poland's government is finally listening. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith has more on this. Now, Brett.
Right. Hi. Thanks, Natasha. So Poland's parliament has just passed a big amendment to this law. While the law itself still stays in place, there will now be no more penalties, no jail time for anyone convicted of breaking it. So I wouldn't call this like a full 180 reversal, but it comes pretty close.
Right. I mean, that's obviously a pretty huge swing. I understand, you know, the change passed with a very sweeping majority in the lower house of parliament. What were the discussions like that actually made this happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think the numbers really say a lot. They speak for themselves. The amendment cleared 388 yeas against 25 against, plus 5 abstentions. So a lot of the people in the room were against law from the very beginning, I will say. One politician pointed out that, you know, it took almost, you know, half a year for Poland to fix this. And that only came after intense international pressure from Israel and from the U.S. I mean, Israel and Poland especially, you know, they have a very important relationship, one that you could say was maybe even born out of the horrors of the Holocaust. Others say that maybe the law itself was taken the wrong way, but at least it put the topic of Poland's Holocaust history back on the table. So that's kind of the
Right. So let's address that history now. Poland originally defended the bill. They said that it was only intended to stop libel against Poland. Obviously, Nazi death camps physically located in Poland doesn't mean that they themselves are Polish, but the criminal jail time slapped on top of that really drew what many say was a very dangerous line here.
Yeah, I mean, this is also a lot about free speech. I mean, I will say that even after the law passed and the debate, you know, became so big, Poland only doubled down on that message, that controversial message. And many Polish leaders claim that Poland had zero complicity with helping the Nazis carry out the Holocaust. Poland's prime minister said that while some Poles may have helped, many Jews were also responsible too. And I think a lot of Israelis and Jewish leaders all over the world had a kind of a problem with that sort of comparison.
Right, and let's be clear about something here. Poland as a nation is widely agreed to have, at the very least, facilitated in many aspects of carrying out the Holocaust. You know, and at the same time, of course, there are tons and tons of incredible stories of Poles helping protect or save Jews from the death camps. Nothing's ever black and white here.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's why, just in terms of free speech, you know, the discussion, the dialogue is so important, just having that talk.
Well, but, you know, it's so interesting what happened here specifically because it seems like this law actually backfired. The Poles wanted to, you know, essentially changed the perspective about Poland's role in the Holocaust, but then it became the only thing that anybody was talking about because this was all over the news, right?
Right. I mean, that's why, you know, for a lot of people, the fact that this took so long and that it's only coming after so much international pressure and so many consequences. I mean, when this law was still a bill, right? When this was still just kind of up for debate, when Israeli leaders first heard about this, the bill being an idea at all, you know, they said, okay, hold on, let's talk. Let's I think Netanyahu said that he got a promise from the Polish parliament that they would have a talk about it, and basically that never happened. They went ahead and they passed the law really fast. So seeing that kind of like stubbornness, that quickness to pass a law and say no, this is the law, this is what we're going to go with. That attitude kind of set the tone for how this is going to go. So yeah, seeing now things kind of reverse or take a step back. Is this too little too late?
Well, we mentioned earlier, obviously, that Israel and Poland have a very deep connection, largely because of the Holocaust. There are high schoolers here that go every year as part of, you know, public school programs here to visit the camps, to kind of learn about what took place, the dark history of the Jewish people. And for this to be the case, you know, a lot of Israelis are clearly relieved to see these changes.
Yeah, I mean, you also have a lot of, you know, Israelis here who have Polish ancestry. I mean, Poland eradicated, I think it's like the vast majority of their Jews, I think like 90% of their Jewish population during World War II time. They totally eradicated. And I'd like to add insult to that injury. This bill was announced on the same day as Holocaust Memorial Day was happening at Auschwitz death camp. So that dichotomy is really, that didn't help Poland's cause, I think, defending the bill.
All right, well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the future of this legislation, if it's just going to be,
well, right now, this amendment, we talked about this repeal, it's passed the lower parliament, it's still got a couple of rungs up the ladder to go, but given the vast majority is really behind it, I think this is kind of the direction we're going to see.
Yeah, all right, well, thank you for the update, Brett.
Of course.
Israel's Defense Department has just given its top award to a truly cutting-edge Israeli invention, the incredible tunnel detection system used to search and destroy terror tunnels in Gaza. But it turns out this system has actually just inspired another innovation, and trust me, you're going to want to hear this. It's literally the opposite of a pain in the butt. The tech has just led to an entirely new and far more comfortable way to get a colonoscopy. And yeah, I told you you'd want to listen up.
The infamous colonoscopy is perhaps one of the most unpleasant medical procedures you'll have in your life. It basically involves a doctor sticking a long tube into your intestine by way of the rectum, with a camera to see what's inside. But the uncomfort is very much worth it, given the fact that a colonoscopy is still the best way to detect cancer in your colon or rectum. These cancers, by the way, are the second most lethal known to man. That's why doctors typically start ordering colonoscopy checks for patients as soon as they hit 50, though sometimes much younger if there's a history of cancer in the family. Okay, so how does Israel's tunnel detection system enter into the equation here? Well, that tech uses a kind of soft, inflatable sleeves that extends only at the front, which then self-propels through the length of the tunnel. A camera attached at the front gives the IDF a clear view of what's inside the tunnel and what it's made out of. The company that made the system refitted the idea to help first responders see the inside of disaster zones like earthquakes and collapsed pipes. So, why not the inside of your intestinal tract? The new procedure similarly extends a thin, soft balloon-like endoscope through the body's internal tubes. Described as kind of a soft, elongated party balloon, it sounds way less unpleasant than a long medical probe, no? And the best part is the new system is way cheaper, saves time, and takes away a lot of awkwardness. But at the end of the day, if it gets more people to regularly do a colonoscopy, then that's the real bottom line here. Nearly 250,000 people die from colorectal cancer every year, but if caught early, the survival rate past the first 5 years is 92%.
Hundreds of supporters of the Jewish state from Norway, Germany, and Finland have just come together at a conference on how to fight back against BDS. Joining me now with more is attorney Nati Rom, the founder of Lev Haolam, which organized this conference and many others like it. Thank you for joining us. Shalom. So tell us about what was discussed here.
So we were speaking about Israel. We gave tools to people all over Europe to come to see with pictures and videos what is the real situation in Israel. And people see all the hypocrisy about Israel in the media and all over the world, and they want to act, they want to support Israel and to be active for Israel.
So who are the participants that you have here? I mean, they're obviously coming from across Europe, but how did you select these people, the demographic, you know?
So once in a month we travel in another place. Now we came to Germany, to Finland, to Norway. Every time it's a surprise. We were in Germany, we were in a place, it was the city hall, there were 500 people, full of flag. Parliament members who came to visit and to listen. People want to know more. We hear a lot of people who are against Israel, a lot of BDS and anti-Semitic organizations who are fighting against Israel. But here, the grassroots movements that we do in Lev Haolam, face-to-face meeting, and people want to help.
And these people that you meet and the people that are taking place in these events, are they Jewish or they're from? So
it's sometimes we speak to only a Jewish crowd, sometimes it's not Jewish, sometimes it's a mix. In Norway we spoke also with the Jewish crowd, and then we spoke in a hotel who was booked, full booked, of people who came especially to this hotel to hear a seminar about Israel. It's very, very impressive. We have in Lev Haolam thousands of people all over the world who receive a package of products from Judea and Samaria. Wow. They heard about this boycott happening here in Israel, and they want to act, and they are supporting by receiving every month a box from Lev Haolam from pioneers in Judea and Samaria.
Now, how many of these conferences have you held? Because I understand this is not the first.
Right. I just came from a conference with people from Papua New Guinea who came to visit me in Samaria in my home only a few hours ago. As much that we hear a lot of the hypocrisy, all of resolutions in human rights, so-called human rights organizations who are fighting Israel. I just was today in court about also a guy from the BDS that Israel doesn't want to give him a visa anymore, and a lot of left organizations are coming in to fight him. So as much of the lie against Israel it's going on, there are people who are standing up, supporters of Israel all over the world, in the States, in Europe, who are coming no more. We see it's a big lie. We see it's not about land or territory. You know, Iran doesn't want to kill us because we have any conflict with them in the borders.
How do you deal with issues like the settlements, as an example, in the West Bank?
So we don't call it the West Bank, we call it the Judea and Samaria, is the biblical name of it. And we deal very straight. This is our homeland. It was here for thousands of years. We don't speak politics. We speak the truth about our history, about our rights here by the Bible, by the history books. And the justice, the only democratic state, the only Jewish state here, we want to live in peace. And all over the world, people are coming here to fight us.
So I guess the narrative that you're sharing here is then that this is not disputed territory, or because obviously it is disputed territory.
When people speak about human rights violation, for example, we speak about human rights of the Jewish people. We speak about my children go to school in bulletproof buses. When you go in Judea and Samaria and you see that the Arabs are living without any fear in their heart, as normal life should be, but our children go to school with bulletproof cars. When they hear the stories about all the terror attacks who happen to us, when they see that we are arrested, I represent people who are arrested in the Temple Mount only because they are praying in the most holy place in Jerusalem. A Jew who pray in Jerusalem will be arrested only because he said Shema Israel.
Is there any discussion of peace and kind of what your hope and your organization's hope is for the future of peace?
We hope and pray for peace 3 times a day, and peace will come, as Golda Meir said, peace will come when the Arabs will love the children more than hate us. Peace will not come. You can see now, we gave Gaza back. We gave them Gaza. Now it's a place for terrorists who shoot us missiles on Tel Aviv and Ashkelon. So this is not the solution. The simple solution is them to stop to teach the children to hate and to kill us. Money of Europe needs to stop to go to terrorists who kill us and sitting in the jail against of every international law. But they need to use this money to bring a real peace.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting to see what kind of impact these conferences have on the people that you speak with. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right, an Israeli man who describes himself as a mind-reading, psychokinetically powered mentalist has just wowed the judges of America's Got Talent. The Eilat native even made the tough-faced Simon Cowell reverse his ex and advance him to the next round. Ladies and gentlemen, we're pleased to present the incredible psychic powers of Lioz Shem Tov. Brace yourselves.
I'm Lioz.
Lioz.
I'm from Israel.
And what are you going to be doing for us today?
I'm a mentalist. I do telekinesis.
What's it called?
Telekinesis.
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 Telekinesis. Am I saying this correctly?
Well, you're saying it with an Israeli accent.
What's he going to move?
It's an ice cream cone.
Is this a joke?
No, Simon, it's not a joke. Well, I mean, kind of. I mean, he is moving those things. Those things are moving. Okay, so maybe Lioz is more of a telekinetic comic than an actual mind reader, but needless to say, he had the audience and the judges in stitches. Initially, both Heidi Klum and Simon Cowell voted against Lioz, but in the end, even the notoriously tough Simon has to hand it to him.
When it first started, I thought, this is really stupid. And then I thought, no, it's very stupid. And then I thought, no, this was actually really funny.
This is not comedy.
Guys, I'd like to remove my ex, please.
Lioz has now advanced past the audition phase of America's Got Talent, which means in a few weeks he'll be competing in one of the biggest reality TV shows of all time. Lioz has been perfecting his comedy routine in clubs all over Israel for the better part of a decade now. He's becoming more and more known in the comedy scene in the US too. He actually made it to the semifinals of NBC's hit show Last Comic Standing back in 2009. And his insane mimic of bizarre animal impressions quickly won the judges over.
I make a dog.
I can watch this forever.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Summer Ulpan, open to everyone.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. We're all in the mood for a laugh every now and then, and that's why today's word is komikai, which means comedian in Hebrew. Now, in case you missed it, make sure you get a chance to see Israeli contestant and komikai Lioz Shem Tov on America's Got Talent. And in the event that he doesn't find the direct line to your funny bone, don't worry. There are plenty of other komikaim or comedians in the sea. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear and warm with a low of 74 or 23 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect sunny skies and a rise in temperatures to a high of 86 or 30 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.64 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.